none other than Brendan McGuire. Of course, he also writes for Three Down Nation. He's also the host of the Access show In The Huddle. And there's two individuals in this community who I would call the top sports encyclopedias, just because of the depth of their sports brains. And not necessarily in this order. They would be Rob Van Stone and Brendan McGuire. Would you agree with that, Curtis, our technical producer?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Brendan.
Well, I think if I guess we would qualify for that if we're talking about useless information. It's not actually anything good for anything. We could sit there for 2 hours during rider practice talking about the most random Winnipeg Jet and Montreal Expo trivia, and it's done absolutely nothing for either one of us. But one day he was wearing old gear. I think it was Lee Jones came up to him at practice and he said...
Rob, you mean, of course.
Yeah, about Rob. And Rob's wearing his Winnipeg Jets gear. And this is during that period where there were no Winnipeg Jets. And he says, can't you talk about or have something from the now? And he said, do you just live in the past? And Rob says, it's all I've got.
Well, I guess another thing that he needs, apparently, because he's going to be on the show tomorrow off the top, but another thing that Rob desperately needs is a new car. And that's what he's doing right now with his wife, Ursula. He's looking for new cars. His car it was at the end of the day, and he's punting, as he said, he's punting his old car.
Good for him.
So he's very hectic. He said he can only come on for 15 minutes tomorrow off the top, but it will milk him.
Sounds like Rob's
get him to go longer.
Sounds like Rob's really stressed about this car buying.
Well, yeah, well, who isn't?
Especially
if
today.
You have to buy a new car.
Especially in this world, yeah.
What's this tariff and what's that tariff is basically what it is.
Changes every 5 minutes.
Yeah. So earlier, just a little bit before you arrived here, Brendan, Arash Madani was talking about Trey Ford, quarterback for the Edmonton Elks. And, he was sort of saying he's not really sure about Trey Ford because he doesn't know really what's around Trey Ford with the Elks at the moment. What is your take on Trey Ford? Because at the moment, you could say he's struggling.
Yeah, Suit said it right on the TSN broadcast. He said at some point, he's going to have to throw the team on his back and win a game, and then that will restore the patience and he'll get a little more rope to work with. I think that's accurate. Whether the weapons around him are good enough, I think that's an open question. I don't know the answer to that. Clearly they prioritized free agency last year with guys on the offensive side of the football. Plus it was the trade. They traded for Curly Gittins Jr., etc. This year, Geno Lewis is gone, and they spent a bunch of money in free agency on the defensive side of the football. So, that's a hard one for me to answer. I will say I've done a bit of a 180 on Trey Ford. I thought coming into the season that he's good for a couple of games and then that's it. We saw that each of the last 2 years when he took over. But we've seen a lot of signs that the players in the room really want this guy under center. There is the fact that he is Canadian. I think that does matter, not just because we want Canadian quarterbacks, but because he's a ratio changer. The BC Lions get to dress 4 American O-linemen when Nathan Rourke is starting. It's a huge difference and opens up so many possibilities elsewhere. But as I've watched him play and when plays break down, it made me hearken back to a discussion I had with the great Bob Obilovich 8 years ago. I found the article I wrote on it. It was in 2017. And people forget that when Doug Flutie arrived in Canada, he was just seen as another guy still, right? Another athlete, high-priced player, whatever. And he struggled that first year. They brought Joe Powpow out of retirement, for crying out loud, because they didn't know that Doug was going to be the answer. Major Harris was getting playing time, and then the other one was Ricky Foggy. We love Ricky Foggy. He had the greatest haircut of any quarterback. Matt Dunnigan said he was the greatest backup quarterback ever, but he was a career backup. And those guys, Flutie was getting benched for those guys. They really didn't know what they had. And it wasn't until they fell to, I think it was 2-8-1, and they cleaned house. They brought in Bob Obilovich, and he said they had him in this conventional drop-back passer mode kind of just what you'd see in American football. That is not what Doug does well. He said that was obvious from the very get-go. Made a bunch of changes. The team goes 4-3 down the stretch. Flutie looks better. Then in the offseason, they completely redo the offense, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
He sets the pro football passing record for over 6,600 yards. So I'm seeing these comparisons because a lot of the commentary I'm hearing from CFL people and 3 Down Nation writers, people who actually understand this better than I do, that Jordan Maximic is not a great fit for what you need for a Trey Ford type of passer. He did well with Vernon Adams, but he's still a.
But he did well with Rourke when Rourke.
And he did well with
pre-NFL.
Yes, definitely. But I would argue Nathan Rourke is very different from Trey Ford as far as their skill set, and
True.
And even Vernon Adams to a certain extent. So it makes me wonder. Well, if he's not the guy to tailor this offense around Trey Ford, who is? And I ask around the league, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? J.C. Abbott and I had a great discussion about it last night. And the truth is, they don't seem to have a coordinator who does the good old Canadian version that, helped Damon Allen, Condridge Holloway, and the stars of the past be their mobile, spectacular selves.
Interesting.
And so
wow.
The big narrative that I'm hearing is that when Mark Trestman took over in Montreal in 2008, he very much had an American system, and that was seen as the prototype. Follow his lead. And Mark Trestman's great, take nothing from him, but he never had any success except when he had Anthony Calvillo or Ricky Ray as his quarterback. I think that Don Hewitt would look like a pretty good offensive mind if he had one of those quarterbacks, right?
You didn't see me when I was a quarterback in touch football, or you wouldn't say that.
Okay, well, fair enough. But so it makes me wonder: are the Elks really all in on Trey Ford? Are they really giving him what he needs? Because boy, those plays that he makes when the pocket breaks down are spectacular. And I just wonder if they get him out of the pocket a little bit more. If maybe they pull out a victory in Winnipeg. And if you can win in Winnipeg, you can win anywhere. Not only are they arguably the best team in the Canadian Football League right now, they by far and away have the best home field advantage. Like we have the best stadium here in Regina. Trust me, I've done my homework on this. John Hodge and I talked about this for hours.
We do have the best stadium.
We do.
Absolutely.
Better and much better than Winnipeg.
Yeah.
But when it comes to home field advantage, they are number one. It is so noisy in that park.
Okay, yes.
Just home field advantage,
at this point. However, the last game, I was very happy to see against the BC Lions, I was very happy to see a pretty good crowd and a very boisterous crowd. And I felt that last home game, hey, maybe people don't like coming to ball games in June. I don't know. But Rider Pride was alive in that game against the BC Lions. And it was loud, it was raucous, and it was good to see.
And our stadium still gets pretty loud, too. Like the playoff game last year, we've talked a lot about how there were 5,000 empty seats, and how did that happen for the Western semifinal? It was still pretty loud in there for the victory over BC. But
Winnipeg's has the best fan base, but I think Saskatchewan's is going to rebound. Or if they keep playing like they are, it's going to be more interesting this year, the Winnipeg-Saskatchewan games, I think, than in the past number. For sure.
You have to think that they're due for a speed bump at some point. I mean, like Winnipeg, they remind me a lot of, I've been talking about NFL, CFL comparisons, so I'll just keep on riding that horse. Baltimore Ravens, for the longest time, their DNA was defense and running the football, right? With Ray Lewis and all these different running backs.
It's a good formula.
It works especially down there. And since we're becoming more like American football, apparently, it works up here too. It's always worked up here, actually. But but as that foundation has crumbled, it was Big Hill, it was Jefferson, and it was Jeffcoat. That was the foundation.
That's a good point.
For their whole program. So Jeffcoat's retired, Big Hill's gone, he's aged out. Jefferson is actually still surprisingly playing at a pretty high level.
What an athlete.
Even today, he's lost a step, but he's still pretty good. But they've had to change their identity to be more of an offensive juggernaut. But boy, it's amazing how they keep churning out these Canadian running backs. Like to go from
I
Harris
know.
to Oliveira and now Peterson. Peterson was a superstar. I'll use the word superstar. I know Ed Hervey doesn't think we have superstar players in Canada. What a dumb thing to say. And then, but he, it doesn't shock me. If there's going to be a star Canadian running back, it would be Peterson. But this is where O'Shea is really earning his whiskers, I would say, his stripes, is that he is flipping the roster and the train just keeps on rolling.
Yeah, I know. That's incredible. But I have a feeling that Corey Mace has the same deal going on with his players that O'Shea has with the Winnipeg players. So it's going to be interesting. I think one thing I thought that's really impressive by the Riders is the emergence of certain players as Canadians. And I'm talking about Daniel Johnson, Thomas Bertrand-Hudon, Devon Campbell, A.J. Allen. A lot of people aren't talking about this, but these are Canadians that have really emerged. Well, Campbell obviously just came this past year. I think even Nelson Lacombo is playing better at safety. He's more confident. He's moving up at times, confident to read what's going on in front of him. That seems to be a key, particularly Daniel Johnson, to be a starting Canadian at left tackle and doing a darn good job. This is impressive.
Well, and it's important because I've talked ad nauseum that this team has not always had the greatest track record at developing Canadian offensive linemen. But I think what has been exciting has been the development of Canadians at non-Canadian positions, for lack of a better term. We saw what we've seen so far this year. We know what Ken Schaefer-Baker can do if he's healthy. We know what Sam Emilus, I almost blanked out there, can do when he's healthy, right?
Yeah.
Like they are complete players, especially Emilus, the way he mauls people downfield. And then Del Duncan Busby, we know that when he's, playing at the top of his game, they've got three really good Canadian receivers, and if they can get them all healthy at the same time, look out. So, as far as having two Canadians in the secondary, that's always been rare, where you can have one at safety and one at one of the other DB positions. I don't think anybody's surprised that Tavon Campbell's playing well. I think it was more of an unknown because, a lot of those guys who age out from the NFL, they come back and they're either damaged goods or they just, I don't know. If you push me into a job where I'm paid 1/10 of what I used to be, I might not be the most motivated either. But he doesn't look like he's lost a step.
He's totally motivated. He's, like we said earlier in the show, He's made the big bucks in the NFL, but he still wants to play football, and he wants to play football in Saskatchewan.
I think that's a part of it.
As a former Regina Ram. Well, the time goes by too fast with you, Brendan. Unfortunately, I wanted to ask you about 30 other things, but we've run out of time. Brendan McGuire, the voice of the Regina Rams, who, of course, this year will be hosting the Vanier Cup, and that'll be a really cool deal.